Hello, this is Jim Schwab. I'm a manager of the American Planning Association's Hazards Planning Research Center. I've been hosting a number of these Sandy discussions on our Recovery News blog. And today with me is Charles Latini, now in his second term as the president of our New Jersey chapter of APA, as well as the principal of his own firm, CWL Planning out of West Trenton, New Jersey. So welcome, Chuck.
And thank you, Jim.
Let's talk a little about some of the impacts and issues in New Jersey for Sandy. We've had a previous discussion with James Rouse about the situation in New York City, but New Jersey's a bit of a different critter. And what have you actually seen? What have you heard in terms of the overall impacts on New Jersey and some of the key issues that you think New Jersey is going to face in recovery?
Well, I think, by and large, we have somewhat similar issues of damage that New York experienced. Certainly, the storm surge affected our coastline. Similarly, along the coast of Hudson County, which is it might as well be the sixth borough of Manhattan. The tidal areas of the Delaware or the Raritan Bay took a hit. Barrier Islands, and some of that all equates to some of the damage that occurred along Long Island, and particularly the Rockaways. Some of the things that are going on right now, the way we're dissecting it as an organization and bringing others into the fold and having these discussions, really seems to be a three-part need, so to speak. One is the short term of 0 to 6 months, what is needed on the ground today, and then leading up through the next year, and then the third tier being beyond that year, and more the longer term questions of what we really need to do. So right now, as far as we're experiencing as a chapter, trying to support the county and local planners as they're experiencing high volumes of residents trying to rebuild, how to rebuild, where do they go for disaster assistance, and then they're, of course, getting mixed messages. So there's quite a bit of confusion on the ground in the short term, and some of that other short term issues really center around the basics of planning and zoning. Mm-hmm. Moving beyond that, of course, is when and where and how to rebuild, in terms of infrastructure and land use.
One of the obvious things, you mentioned local and county planners, one of the obvious differences from New York City, of course, is there you've got this huge municipality of 8 million people with a single city government, a lot of complications, needless to say, but in New Jersey you've got literally hundreds of municipalities, I'm sure at least dozens of them scattered right up and down the shoreline of a lengthy coast. Can you talk to some of the issues with regard to the capacities of these many local governments and some of their relationships with the state? It seems the state probably has a much more significant role to play in New Jersey in some respects.
In New Jersey, we have 21 counties. Not all of them got affected in very different ways. I mean, some very minimal with tree damage and localized flooding, but by and large, everything is limited to the coast. And we have 566 total municipalities. In terms of capacity, even every county's in a different at different levels. Some of our counties are really progressive, and they really have fantastic planning staffs, and others, their county governments don't maybe see the value of planning, and their support of planning shows in their staffing levels and their ability to handle certain things. Municipalities vary greatly as well. Certainly, it would be great if we had the planning capacity of New York City, but by and large, I think a lot of municipalities are really supported by planning consultants in the area. And in terms of planning resources, the region, New York and New Jersey, has a wealth of professionals and institutions, all with tremendous capacity to be able to assist. But because it is very much a consulting type role, by and large, I mean, not everyone. It makes the relationships and the ability to get in and speak and reach the local officials a little bit more challenging.
Okay. What exactly is happening at the state level? I've heard you discuss that in some other meetings. Which agencies are playing what roles, and who's more significant in terms of moving recovery planning along?
We've New Jersey's had a very proactive state planning function for quite some time, and with this recent governor, they decided to take on what they're calling the state strategic plan, and the one thing that this effort really jumps off on right from the get-go is where others didn't concentrate so much. Other efforts concentrated on how the state can develop a plan and municipalities implement it, and tried to back in the resources that the state was going to bring to the table. This effort is really about sort of looking at the state first, across the cabinets, across all the departments, and aligning them to one common objective, the set of objectives that's in the state strategic plan. So that process has been going on for a better part of a year or two, and what is really beneficial to us today is the fact that they have been talking and they understand the need to talk amongst themselves and with each other to be able to support the municipalities. I mean, it was often that one department would do something and it was contrary to another one, but now it's an effort to try to get it all together. So I say that because what I believe the state has done in and recently pulling the state strategic plan off of the state planning commission's agenda to hold it for additions to the storm and economic resiliency, really, is trying to utilize that framework that already began as a means to continue that level of coordination moving forward. I'm not exactly sure how it's all going to play out yet, because the newly appointed recovery czar, I believe they're calling him, right, has been brought on just on Monday. So I'm sure he's up to his eyeballs trying to get his head around things and developing a strategy to move forward. But, by and large, APA New Jersey has been, along with APA National and New York Metro, pulling folks together and being able to offer what we think is a sensible approach to move forward with, realizing that other entities are going to try to jump out there and do things, and maybe some of it will be good and maybe some of it won't. We don't know, but the one thing's for sure is we really need to create a plan for the process by which we all move forward with. And we've been in discussion with the state, and they know we're moving forward with that, and they know we've been talking to the other planning advocates and the county planners and key municipalities along the coast.
Yeah, and you just had a big kind of workshop meeting on Saturday over at Rutgers. Can you tell us a little of what came out of that?
Yeah, I mean, well, especially when you're dealing with an issue of such magnitude that you're trying to get your head around it first. So certainly a lot more questions were created than answers at this point. But really the one thing that jumped out at us is really the short-term needs being as great as they are, and really the need to develop a communication strategy, not just with local officials, but with the public at large. They don't know where to go for information, or they're being fed, 10, 15 different, links to different websites and phone numbers, and one municipality is telling a resident one thing, and then they're turning around and calling a friend that lives in another municipality, and all of a sudden you got, miscommunication. So
who's right, who's wrong, which is more important?
Right.
Yes.
And so really addressing those short-term needs became something that jumped right out. And clearly we're not ready to have discussions with folks who still are not at home yet, living in temporary housing, which is in very short supply, and definitely an issue that we've all needed to be dealing with. And people are still cleaning up. I mean, so being able to address those really long-term planning issues is something we'll continue to think about how we roll out. But really the needs up front, the nuts and bolts of planning and zoning and rebuilding and code enforcement, those kind of things are really the short-term needs. And the other thing that really jumped out is, not every county, again, is at the same capacity as other ones, and their hazard mitigation plans are by and large very different from county to county. There was one county along the coast doesn't even have a hazard mitigation plan, which was really surprising to me, and FEMA is working really hard with them to get something on the books right now. And by and large, what we're also finding out is some counties planning departments are involved in those mitigation plans, and others are solely developed by OEM personnel or public safety folks who are critical in that planning process, but maybe we're missing some important details that planners can bring to the table.
Land use, for instance. Yeah.
Also along that hazard mitigation planning idea is that some municipalities just adopt merely what the counties have put in place, and they really haven't gotten as specific as they should down on the ground. So it's going to be a real opportunity to get folks to understand the comprehensive planning that includes these types of efforts is really important, not just for protecting people, but ensuring that our ability to recover after these things is a lot shorter and strengthened.
Yeah, well, that leads to an important question, and I know this plays to a bit of a strength on your part, so let me get to it. One of the things that happens after a disaster like this, often at least, is the opportunity to reassess things like the settlement pattern of a community, the overall urban design, as well as building standards, building codes, things of that nature. What opportunities are you seeing, do you feel may emerge in terms of some opportunities for replanning and redesign in the affected communities?
Having grown up in New Jersey, and certainly I'll take the 10 years I spent in New York City living along the Hudson as, living in the area because, my family's all here, and I've never left the coast of New York, New Jersey other than my travels. I've spent considerable amounts of time as a youth and as an adult at the Jersey and New York shore. And as I became sort of enlightened, so to speak, from a planning and design perspective, a lot of things jumped out at me as like crazy. How bicycle and pedestrian dominated communities can not serve those functions almost in the least bit in some cases. So I think the opportunity is, particularly when we're dealing with infrastructure and rebuilding people's homes in certain places or not in other places really starts to give us the opportunity to rethink how, say, the boulevard on Long Beach Island, which is a 4-lane highway with a big center turning lane, and folks trying to cross it every day during summer hours is slowed down and humanized, and thus strengthening, I think, the land use potential adjacent to it, and then thinking about how different building types can actually be brought into the picture. It doesn't always have. Maybe some of the solutions is to not rebuild on certain parts of the islands where bay wants to meet ocean, and there's constant breaches and flooding all the time, even when there's not a catastrophe. And introduce different building types in a way that maybe has more of a mixed use component, or concentrates development in a way that puts it in a building type that maybe is a lot stronger than just to say the single family stick built homes. So there's things like that. I mean, certainly we'll get into a lot more of the opportunities as we explore them with the communities. But I think there's a real opportunity to create better beach communities.
Yeah. One question that flows from that, too, is those beach communities are often big opportunities in terms of tourism as an economic development tool. They attract a lot of visitors as well as having full-time residents there. And that also introduces some issues about urban design, the aesthetic attractions of those communities for visitors, how that affects economic development. Do you have any thoughts about that aspect of things as the rebuilding looks forward?
Sure. I mean, look at some of these communities, and you'll see that the Wawas and the gas stations and even some of the restaurants that got developed are very auto driven, and their design is in some case uninspiring to be kind. So when you're thinking about redesigning particularly commercial areas that may not be designed as strongly for the pedestrian, I think you're automatically starting to get into some design aspects that give us an opportunity to create a better place, one that we know as we deal in urban design issues across the country, that people like aspects of building design and orientation that facilitates pedestrian and architectural components that relate better to the street. Mm-hmm. So I think in thinking through some of these things aesthetically, just on a day-to-day basis, we have the opportunity to create even more attractive places. Because let's be honest, people are going down to the shore because of the ocean and the other types of entertainment type activities. But when you're, so that's always going to be a draw. But we can strengthen that draw, I think, with some really strong design elements.
Yeah, because once people get there, once they find a place to put that car, walking the strip is actually much more interesting.
Yeah. So let's make it as safe and as interesting as we can, and I think that would ultimately just strengthen the economies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any closing thoughts you want to offer about the role of the New Jersey chapter and planners in New Jersey with regard to this whole process before we close?
Well, I think, as we've been thinking about this, and I've been, chapters, New Jersey's lucky because we have a strong chapter, a lot of great volunteers. Certainly I wouldn't be able to do half the things for the chapter as I'm able to do without the strength of our membership and the resources that we have. But making those resources go as far as we can during this effort is going to be important. But I also don't want to let the members believe that every single thing we do is just going to be tailored to the beachfront. I mean, certainly this is the storm du jour of the day, right? So, but last year, Irene hit this state in a different way. So inland communities got flooded and had power outages issues where, the beach didn't have as much.
Yeah, so the vulnerabilities are statewide, really.
Yeah. So our opportunity really is to look at vulnerability and building resiliency statewide. I believe we have a captive audience, so to speak. I mean, even those of us who live inland and see our friends and families going off and business as usual again, because all we had was power out for a few days. Their ear is still up as to what's being talked about along the beach and our tidal communities. So our opportunity really is to take that message deeper into and include the entire state and really show why planning is important.
Okay. Thank you very much. I enjoyed
Thank you, Jim.
the conversation with you today.